Hello guys, we are here today with the great Ulysses Owens. How are you, man?
I'm good, man. How are you
Thanks
doing?
for being here with us. I'm doing great. So let's start talking about jazz.
Okay.
You know, nowadays I think jazz is really a good thing, but it's really getting a little less recognized, maybe.
Yeah, well.
Why do you think is that, and how could we change that thing?
Well, first of all, I think those are two really great questions. I think jazz is not getting as recognized because I was telling someone the other day, jazz I think is in a really huge identity crisis, right? So I think right now jazz is trying to figure out what does it want, and the reason why I can't figure out what it wants is because it's basically in a position where it doesn't know what goals it has, right? So with it not knowing what goals it has, it's trying to figure out like, okay, who am I, right? So in one regard, jazz musicians want to, be famous, right? They all want to have the same kind of success that, whoever the latest pop star is. So what they're doing is they're playing some of the same songs and they're trying to dress the same way. And so, that's one vantage point. Another vantage point is, they want to sort of be disconnected from the past, where I think jazz has been in a real sort of identity crisis because some of the greatest musicians who created this music, we're getting further and further away from them, which happens with anything. It's like as a kid, when you're younger, you listen to everything your parents have to say, and when you get older, you don't really want to, hear what they have to say, and then you get much older, and you realize, then you get much older, and you're like, wow, mom and dad were right. So I think we're in that place where we're trying to figure out who and what we really are. So I think that's one of the big problems. And then the other thing, I think that with jazz education, it's great, but I think we make it too difficult. I think, the goal of any jazz student should really be, I want to make the music feel good, because honestly, that's what all the greats did. If you look at, John Coltrane, Miles Davis, or Charlie Parker, when you put on their records, you don't think about, oh man, they played a fifth above or pentatonic scale. What you think about is, I've never heard a sound like that, and I've never felt the way that this record makes me feel. And that's what brings us to this music. And so to me, to sort of finish your question, or my answer of it, is I think we got to get back to that. We got to get back to attracting people to the sound of it, and then the feeling that they get, and then they'll want to learn more about it when they are attracted to the sound and the feeling. And that to me is what we've lost.
Do you think that maybe jazz started getting away from people because of this education thing, making things so much more difficult, less melodic?
Right. I don't think that's the case, because I mean, who composed music more difficult than aspects of John Coltrane or Oliver Nelson or so many great artists, Abdullah Ibrahim. I mean, a lot of these guys, to me back then, they were composing things so ahead of their time.
True, but what I mean maybe is more difficult to listen to, because they were difficult but enjoyable.
What I will tell you is I don't think it's more difficult to listen to, but what makes it difficult is the attention span has changed, right? So for instance, back then, when someone heard Thelonious Monk for the first time, first of all, there was not a YouTube clip that we could check. There was not, we couldn't go to a CD store and get, 5 different versions of his tunes. One record came out and that was it. And you listened to that one record until his next record came out. So a lot of the issue now, I really think, isn't so much the ability to not listen, it's that we don't have a big attention span, and it's too easy for us now. We really, I think, are in a place where we're overexposed to music and to everything, because right now, we get it too quickly. Like when I first started learning jazz, if I didn't go to the library or the CD store to buy CDs, I wouldn't have the music in my home. Whereas in before, or now, I can go onto Pandora and Spotify and all these, media components. With a click, there's a tune available. We could leave here today and say whoever, some famous drummer, and on my cell phone, I can Google that person and hear them in a minute. That didn't happen, So I think overexposure and the lack of a real attention span.
Do you have any advice on this issue?
Yeah.
Like, do you think it's possible? Sometimes I find this thing in myself too. I listen to something and it's really hard to concentrate. Do you have any exercise for listening, like active listening? Any advice or something?
Yeah, I think you have to make time for it. So like for instance, I produce records a lot, and one of the things that I have to do when I decide to take on an artist, or even once the record is almost done, I have to set aside time. I have to turn the computer off, move the cell phone into another room, either get headphones or speakers, whatever I choose, and I have to isolate time to focus on that, and that to me is much more difficult now than ever, because my cell phone isn't just ringing. I have text messages coming in. When text messages aren't coming in, I have Facebook messages. When that's not coming in, I have Twitter messages. When that's not linked, so a cell phone now has 6, 7 different message components, right? So to me, my advice would be make time to do and study whatever it is you want to study, and don't budge. So, say I'm going to take 30 minutes and I'm going to listen to this Philly Joel Jones solo, and I'm going to focus my energy, and I promise if you do that, you will pick up things in that solo that you've never heard before. But the reality is we're not doing that. Now what we're doing is we're listening to his solo, and then we're like looking at a phone while we're listening.
True. I know exactly what you mean.
Or we're checking emails while we're listening, and so what happens is our attention is more divided. So, and that to me is what didn't exist before.